Part 1. When the inner man is lost. There comes a moment in every man's life when silence feels heavier than words. He stands there, maybe in his car after a long day, maybe under the dim light of his apartment, and realizes that no matter how many roles he plays, how many battles he wins, or how many people depend on him, something inside still feels missing. A hollow echo that whispers, "Who am I when I'm not being strong?" Since childhood, men have been told a story that strength means not crying, that leadership means control, that vulnerability means weakness. And so, generation after generation, boys grow into men who wear invisible armor, taught to protect, to conquer, to suppress. They learn to shut down the trembling heart that once dreamed freely. They learn to bury emotions deep enough that even they can't find them anymore. They become experts in silence, masters of endurance, prisoners of their own expectations. He was taught to chase success, not peace, to build walls, not trust, to run faster, not pause and listen. And when pain came, no one told him it was okay to feel it. Instead, they said, "Be a man. Man up. Don't let them see you cry." So he locked it away, the shame, the guilt, the heartbreak, the loneliness, sealed behind a smile that says, "I'm fine." But deep down, he knows he isn't. Because no amount of money, validation, or control can fill the void of a soul disconnected from its truth. Have you ever seen a man who's tired? Not physically, but spiritually? He's the one sitting quietly in the corner, scrolling through his phone, pretending to be okay. He's the one working endless hours, not because he loves it, but because stillness feels unbearable. He's the one laughing loudly at the bar, masking the emptiness that hits the moment he's alone. He's the one who's forgotten what peace feels like. In the modern world, men are expected to do everything and feel nothing, to provide, to protect, to lead, even when their own inner compass is spinning. They are told that emotions make them unreliable, that softness makes them weak, that asking for help makes them less of a man. But what if that's the lie that's been killing them slowly? What if true masculinity, divine masculinity, isn't about power over others, but presence within oneself? Divine masculine is not aggression. It's awareness. It's not dominance. It's direction. It's not pride. It's purpose. It's the stillness before action, the structure that allows creation to flow, the courage to protect not out of fear but out of love. It's the sun shining because it must, not because it wants recognition. But the modern masculine has forgotten this truth. He's been programmed to think that love must be earned through success, and worth measured by achievement. He's been taught to chase validation instead of alignment. So he builds and builds and builds, but inside the foundation cracks. Because the one thing he's never built is home within himself. And then one day it happens. Something collapses. The relationship fails. The career crumbles. The illusion of control slips away. And for the first time he meets himself. Not the version the world applauds, but the one the world never sees. The boy who was never told it's safe to cry. The man who's exhausted from pretending. The soul who just wants to rest. He looks in the mirror and it hits him. I don't even know who I am anymore. That's the beginning of awakening, though it feels like the end. Because before the masculine can rise, he must first fall. Before he can lead others, he must learn to lead himself. Before he can love another, he must meet the parts of him that he's always abandoned. And that requires a kind of strength no one taught him. The strength to sit in his pain without escaping. The strength to admit, I don't have it all figured out. The strength to open his heart, even when the world says, close it. That is the moment the divine masculine begins to stir. But let's be honest, it's not an easy path. When the ego has ruled for so long, it resists surrender like fire fights water. He'll want to fix everything. He'll want to control, to rationalize, to explain. But the healing of the masculine isn't about doing. It's about allowing. It's the art of unclenching the fists he's carried for years. The art of silence that doesn't suffocate, but listens. The art of standing tall, not because he's unbreakable, but because he finally accepts that breaking is human. And maybe this is you. Maybe you've spent years trying to prove something. To your father, to your boss, to society, to yourself. Maybe you've worn the mask of the provider, the achiever, the protector, but deep down you long for something simpler. Peace, connection, meaning. You want to stop fighting everyone and everything. You just want to breathe again. And that's not weakness. That's your soul trying to come home. Every man carries both light and shadow. The wounded masculine seeks control because he's terrified of chaos. The healed masculine brings order to chaos, not by fighting it, but by understanding it. He no longer hides behind anger, he listens to what anger is protecting. He no longer seeks validation. He becomes his own witness. He no longer fears the feminine. He honors her within and without. Because he knows. To lead with love is the highest form of power. The tragedy is not that men feel pain. It's that they were never told they could. They were taught to fight dragons, not to face the one inside. To protect others, not to protect their own heart. To love women, but not to understand the feminine within themselves. And so they run from it. From softness. From emotion. From vulnerability. From connection. But the more they run, the further they drift from their divine nature. The nature that was never meant to dominate but to balance. The truth is, the world needs healed men. Men who don't confuse control with leadership. Men who can hold space without fixing. Men who can listen without judging. Men who can be both protector and poet. Because when a man is connected to his divine essence, he doesn't have to prove he's powerful. His presence alone radiates strength. The room softens. The chaos settles. The feminine feels safe. The world feels whole. So if you are that man standing in the dark, wondering where your light went, don't rush to rebuild. Sit. Breathe. Listen. Your soul is not lost. It's just waiting for you to remember. The armor you've carried has done its job. Kept you alive. But it's time to take it off. Because strength without softness is just survival. And survival is not why you came here. You came here to live. To feel. To lead with love. Soft pause, music swells slightly, cinematic string rise. The world doesn't need more perfect men. It needs present men. Awake men. Men who dare to stand unarmored. Grounded in truth, guided by heart. The masculine journey is not about conquering others, but about coming home to the self that was never lost, only forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, your awakening begins right here. In this silence. Part 2, the sacred blueprint of the divine masculine. The divine masculine is not something to be learned. It is something to be remembered. Before the world told him what a man should be, before titles, achievements, failures, or expectations, the masculine was pure consciousness. Silent awareness. Steady presence. The mountain before the storm. The riverbank that gives form to flowing water. That was his essence. Not dominance, not control, but direction. Not power over, but power within. In every soul. Both masculine and feminine energies exist. They are not gender but frequencies. Two cosmic currents that dance through all creation. Like the sun and the moon, the breath and the heartbeat. The giving and the receiving. The divine feminine creates through emotion, intuition, and flow. She is the river. The divine masculine gives direction and structure to that flow. He is the riverbank. Without the riverbank, the water floods and loses shape. Without the water, the riverbed dries and loses life. They were never meant to fight. They were meant to dance in rhythm, in respect, in balance. But somewhere along humanity's journey, that dance was forgotten. The masculine grew afraid of the feminine's depth. Her emotions felt chaotic, unpredictable, uncontrollable. And in his fear he built walls. He created systems, rules, hierarchies, not from wisdom but from insecurity. He thought, if I can control her, I can feel safe. But the moment control replaced connection, the sacred masculine turned into its distorted shadow, the wounded masculine. The one who conquers instead of protects. Who silences instead of listens. Who dominates instead of leads. You can see it everywhere, not just in men but in the collective. A world obsessed with doing, producing, achieving, but terrified of feeling, resting, surrendering. We glorify logic and dismiss intuition. We build empires yet lose intimacy. We measure success in numbers but forget meaning. This is not just personal. It's planetary. The imbalance of masculine energy has shaped history itself. Wars, competition, destruction. They are the echoes of a masculine force cut off from its divine heart. But even in this distortion, the truth never died. It was only buried beneath the noise, the ego, the armor. And now, collectively, the masculine is awakening. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Because there is a sacred blueprint written in the soul of every man. A map back to his true nature. He feels it when he gazes at the horizon and longs for peace. He feels it when he loves deeply and realizes power cannot exist without tenderness. He feels it when his soul whispers, "There must be more than this." So what is the true blueprint of the divine masculine? At its core it is presence. Not the kind of presence that demands attention, but the kind that holds it. When a healed masculine walks into a room, he doesn't need to speak loudly. His energy says, "You're safe here." His stillness commands more than his words ever could. He doesn't chase, because he trusts. He doesn't control, because he flows with purpose. This is not weakness, it is mastery. The mastery of one who knows that peace is not found in the absence of chaos, but in the ability to remain centered within it. The divine masculine is the protector, not the controller. He protects what is sacred, not what feeds his ego. He protects love, not pride. He protects creation, not domination. When a man rises in his divine energy, he doesn't need to prove his strength. He becomes the very ground others can stand upon. He anchors stability in the midst of emotion. He builds bridges, not walls. He brings truth, even when it's uncomfortable, but delivers it with compassion, not arrogance. He is fire, but fire that gives warmth, not burns. He is the sword, but the sword that defends, not wounds. In relationships, the divine masculine plays a sacred role. He is the container through which love becomes grounded. He brings clarity to the feminine's vision, translating her dreams into form, turning energy into creation. But to do this, he must first trust her. He must learn to listen, not to fix, but to understand. He must learn to receive, not just give. Because even the sun rests when night comes. And even the strongest tree needs the rain. The feminine, in her grace, does not heal him through instruction. She heals him through reflection. When he meets her, truly meets her, he sees all the places where he has been numb. Her love cracks his armor. Her intuition mirrors his avoidance. Her softness challenges his control. And if he's willing to stay, if he's brave enough not to run, he will find that she isn't there to destroy him. She's there to remind him of the warmth he's buried under logic, the heart he's locked behind pride, the divine purpose he's forgotten in his pursuit of power. But make no mistake, this awakening is not comfortable. It demands the masculine to look at every illusion he's built, his relationship with money, success, sexuality, and power. He must face the truth that much of what he thought was strength was fear, wearing armor, that his obsession with control was born from deep insecurity, that his emotional detachment was not maturity, but avoidance. And that's okay, because awareness is the first act of courage. To heal, the masculine must stop running from his shadow and begin to integrate it. To sit with his anger until it reveals its pain. To face his shame until it softens into compassion. To look into the mirror and say, "I forgive you." That's the blueprint, the inner alchemy. Turning wounded power into divine purpose. Turning dominance into direction. Turning protection into presence. In the twin flame journey, this process is sacred. The masculine often represents the one who runs, the one who resists, not because he doesn't feel love, but because he feels it too deeply. It threatens the walls he's built. It calls him home before he believes he deserves it. But divine love has infinite patience. It waits through his confusion, his silence, his distance, not to enable him, but to remind him that love doesn't disappear when he fails. And when he finally surrenders, he doesn't lose control. He finds peace. He doesn't fall apart, he finally falls into himself. The sacred masculine, once awakened, moves differently. He walks slower. He listens longer. He speaks less but with truth. He doesn't chase attention, he radiates integrity. He honors the feminine not because she needs him but because he sees her. And in seeing her, he finally sees himself. For she is not his opposite. She is his reflection. The moon that reflects. his light back to him so he can remember who he truly is. When the divine masculine awakens, the world shifts. Because healed men build healed families. Healed families create healed generations. And healed generations birth a healed planet. It all begins with one man choosing to stop fighting the world and start listening to his soul. Soft ambient tone rises, slow crescendo. Cinematic close. To the men listening, you don't have to carry the weight alone. You don't have to hide behind the mask. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. To yourself. To your emotions. To the truth that strength and softness can coexist. Because your power was never in your fists. It was always in your heart. Pause. The music fades into a single note, warm, golden. The divine masculine is rising, not as a conqueror but as a guardian. Not as a ruler but as a lover. Not as a savior, but as a soul remembering that love was his purpose all along. Part 3: The Wounded Masculine, Shadows of Fear and Control. Before the divine masculine rises, he must walk through the shadows he spent a lifetime avoiding. And those shadows are not out there. They live within him. They speak in the language of control, pride, silence, and fear. They whisper, "Don't feel. Don't trust. Don't need anyone." For centuries the masculine has been praised for his armor, but never for the heart that beats beneath it. He's been celebrated for winning battles, but never for surrendering to truth. He's been rewarded for conquering the world, yet punished for simply wanting to be held. Every man carries wounds. Not all are visible. Some were inherited, passed down through generations of fathers who didn't know how to feel, who believed that love was weakness, and that silence was strength. Others were formed through betrayal, a mother's rejection, a lover's abandonment, a friend's disloyalty. Each wound carved a deeper message into his subconscious. I must protect myself. I cannot trust love. And so the masculine builds walls. He hides behind achievements, control, logic, and distance. Not because he doesn't want to connect, but because he fears what connection might cost him. There are many faces of the wounded masculine. Sometimes he's the controller, the man who tries to manage every detail, every person, every outcome. He fears uncertainty because chaos reminds him of loss. He thinks if he can keep everything in line, nothing will ever break him again. But control is just another prison. A fortress built from fear, not freedom. And in trying to protect himself from pain, he also shuts out love. Sometimes he's the achiever, the one who runs endlessly towards success, collecting trophies, promotions, recognition. He builds empires, but inside he's exhausted. Because no matter how high he climbs, the summit never feels like home. The applause fades, and the silence between victories becomes unbearable. What he truly wants isn't validation, it's connection. But he doesn't know how to receive it without feeling exposed. Then there's the withdrawn one, the man who disappears when things get too real. He ghosts, avoids, shuts down, not out of cruelty, but because intimacy triggers his deepest wound, the fear of being seen and then abandoned. To him, love feels dangerous. It demands vulnerability, and vulnerability once meant pain. So he runs. He convinces himself that distance equals safety, not realizing that in protecting himself from rejection, he's rejecting himself first. And finally, there's the angry one, the man whose rage hides a broken child. Anger is his armor. It's easier to explode than to cry. Easier to destroy than to admit he's hurt. Easier to control others than to confront his own shame. But underneath every burst of fury, there's grief, deep, ancient, unspoken grief. The grief of not being allowed to feel. The grief of being told, real men don't hurt. Have you ever seen it? A father who yells because he doesn't know how to say, I'm scared. A lover who pulls away because he doesn't know how to say, I need you. A man who keeps working late because he doesn't know how to rest without feeling useless. These are not monsters. They are men in pain. Men who were never taught that healing is part of strength. But here's the truth. What the masculine fears most is not failure. It's feeling. Because to feel is to face the very pain he's built his identity around avoiding. He fears being soft because he was mocked for it. He fears surrender because it once led to betrayal. He fears love because it demands the one thing he's never given himself: forgiveness. The wounded masculine clings to ego because ego gives him certainty. It tells him who he is, what he's worth, and why he must keep fighting. Ego says, if you just achieve more, earn more, control more, you'll be safe. But the heart whispers something different. Stop running. You're already enough. And that whisper terrifies him, because if he stops running, he'll have to face the silence. And in that silence, he'll meet his shadow. The boy who still aches for love. The man who still doesn't feel worthy of it. Healing the masculine doesn't begin with grand awakenings. It begins with small moments of truth. The moment he admits, I'm tired. The moment he allows himself to cry. The moment he says, I don't know what to do. The moment he stops trying to fix everything and finally allows himself to feel. That's where the transformation begins. Not in power but in presence. Not in victory but in vulnerability. The journey through the shadow is not punishment. It's purification. Every heartbreak, every loss, every collapse is not there to destroy him, but to peel away everything that isn't real. Strips away the false identities, the titles, the armor, the pride, until only truth remains. And that truth is simple. He is not broken. He was never unworthy. He only believed he had to earn love that was already his. When the masculine stops seeing pain as weakness and starts seeing it as a teacher, he reclaims his power. Because pain doesn't make him less divine. It makes him human. And being human was never the opposite of being sacred. It was always the bridge to it. So what does healing look like? It looks like sitting in silence without the need to fix it. It looks like breathing through anger instead of reacting. It looks like saying, I'm sorry, without defending. It looks like opening his heart even if it shakes. It looks like meeting his own eyes in the mirror and saying, I forgive you for not knowing better. Healing looks like softness returning to strength. And in that softness, the divine masculine begins to remember who he is. He realizes he doesn't have to control love. He can trust it. He doesn't have to dominate the feminine. He can protect and cherish her. He doesn't have to prove his worth. He can live it, breathe it, embody it. Because when he heals, he no longer fears his emotions. He understands them as compass points, guiding him back to authenticity, back to love, back to himself. Soft instrumentals swell, piano and strings blend. The masculine was never meant to be a warrior forever. He was meant to become a guardian of truth, of integrity, of love. He was meant to walk beside the feminine, not ahead of her. To build, not to control. To lead, not to dominate. To love, not to possess. And that begins only when he faces the shadows. Not to fight them, but to listen to the pain they carry. So if you, or someone you know, feels trapped in that armor, take a breath. The walls you've built were never your failure. They were your protection. But you don't need them anymore. You are safe now. You can let the light in. You can rest. You can be both strong and gentle. Both protector and dreamer. Both fire and peace. Because the world doesn't need perfect men. It needs healed ones. Men who can hold the weight of truth and still choose love anyway. Pause, long silence, one exhale. That's where the divine masculine begins to rise. Not from power, but from peace. Music fades, the sound of quiet rain. Part 4: The Feminine Mirror. How the divine feminine awakens healing in the masculine. For the wounded masculine, healing rarely begins in solitude. It begins the moment he meets her. The embodiment of everything he once buried. The one who doesn't fix him, but reflects him. She doesn't arrive to rescue or to change him, but to awaken him. To remind him of the sacred truth he's forgotten. That love was never meant to be a battlefield, but a homecoming. The divine feminine doesn't heal through force. She heals through frequency, through presence, through the way her silence speaks louder than any argument, through the way her heart remains open, even when her hands let go. Her power is not in demanding transformation, but in being transformation, in standing rooted in love while the world trembles around her. She becomes a mirror, and in her reflection, the masculine finally sees himself clearly. First, he resists. Her light exposes the shadows he spent a lifetime avoiding. Every time she looks at him with compassion instead of judgment, he feels both comforted and terrified, because for the first time someone truly sees him. Not the mask, not the achievements, but the raw, trembling essence beneath. And that level of truth can feel unbearable. So he runs. He hides behind logic, behind anger, behind silence. He convinces himself she's too emotional, too intense, too much. But what he's really saying is, she's showing me too much of myself. The feminine, if she is wise, doesn't chase. She understands that she cannot pull a man out of his shadow. He must choose to walk out himself. So she steps back. She anchors herself in her own energy and lets her love become a frequency, not a chain. Her detachment is not rejection. It's reverence. It's the sacred act of saying, I love you enough to let your soul grow without my control. And in her stillness, she becomes the catalyst. Because it is in her absence that he feels the truth of her presence. When she no longer tries to prove her worth, he's forced to face the silence she leaves behind, a silence that echoes louder than any words. It's in that quiet that the masculine begins to awaken. He starts to question why her distance hurts so deeply, why her voice still echoes in his mind, why her energy lingers in his chest long after she's gone. And slowly the realization dawns. She was never the source of his pain. She was the mirror of it. You see, the divine feminine holds the emotional blueprint that the masculine has long suppressed. She feels everything. Every nuance, every vibration, every wound that lives unspoken in the air between them. Her intuition reads what logic cannot translate. And though this sensitivity once made her feel too much, it is precisely what makes her the key to his awakening. When he is lost in ego, she stands as intuition. When he drowns in control, she flows as surrender. When he fears love, she becomes love. Not the conditional, transactional kind, but the ancient, cosmic kind that says, no matter how far you fall, the truth of who you are remains untouched. Through her he remembers softness. He learns that emotion is not the enemy, that tears are not shameful, that love does not make him weak, it makes him whole. Her embrace teaches him that he can be both warrior and healer. Her patience shows him that time is not a punishment, it's preparation. Her forgiveness reveals that peace is not found through control, but through surrender. But this journey is not easy for her either. For the feminine to truly awaken the masculine, she must first heal the parts of herself that need to save him. Because if her love depends on his transformation, then it's not unconditional. It's attachment. So she learns to release the urge to fix. She learns that divine union cannot exist where codependency hides. She learns to love him from a place of freedom, not fear. And in doing so, she transcends the victimhood of he hurt me and steps into the mastery of he reflected me. Every time she chooses peace over proving, he feels it. Every time she honors her boundaries with grace instead of anger, he feels it. Every time she forgives, not to excuse but to free herself, he feels it. Her energy speaks in frequencies his soul recognizes, even when his mind cannot yet comprehend. And deep inside, something begins to shift. One night, maybe when the noise of the world fades, he'll think of her, the way she looked at him, the way she spoke truth even when it broke her heart. And he'll realize she wasn't trying to control him. She was calling him back to himself. She was never his punishment. She was his mirror, the living embodiment of his own divine counterpart, the missing half of his soul's equation. In the twin flame journey, this dance between feminine and masculine is sacred. She awakens his heart. He anchors her spirit. She teaches him how to feel. He teaches her how to ground. Together they learn how to be, not as opposites but as reflections, different expressions of the same truth. And yet, union is not possible until both energies are balanced within. The feminine must embody her sovereignty. The masculine must reclaim his presence. Only then can they meet not from need, but from wholeness. When he finally stops running, when he stops fearing her love, he begins to understand what she was teaching all along. That love is not meant to be possessed. It's meant to be embodied. He realizes that she was never asking for perfection. She was asking for presence. For him to show up, not as a savior but as himself. And when that happens, the healing ripples through both souls. She no longer waits for him to awaken, because he already has. And he no longer fears her depth, because he's found safety within it. The divine feminine awakens the masculine not through demand, but through vibration. Not through force, but through faith. Her power is silent but seismic. Her love is fierce but freeing. And her purpose is eternal. To remind him of the truth that even warriors deserve to rest in love. Music swells, warm strings, soft percussion, rising like sunrise. To every woman walking this path, you are not here to prove your worth to him. You are here to remember your own. You are not here to chase the unready. You are here to anchor the sacred. And to every man listening, she is not your enemy. She is not your test. She is the echo of your own divinity, calling you home. When the feminine and masculine finally meet in truth, the war ends. Not because one wins, but because both surrender. To love, to balance, to God. And in that surrender, they don't lose themselves. They finally remember who they were always meant to be. The music fades into stillness. A single heartbeat remains, fading into silence. Part 5. When the masculine begins to heal. The signs of awakening and integration. There comes a moment, after the chaos, after the running, after the silence and the distance, when the masculine stops fighting. He sits down, maybe on a quiet morning, maybe in the middle of an ordinary day, and realizes something has changed. The war inside him has gone still. For the first time, he doesn't want to win. He just wants to understand. That is where healing begins. Healing doesn't always arrive with thunder or revelation. Sometimes it enters quietly, like a single breath he didn't know he was holding. Finally exhaled, he notices the world differently now. The same things that once triggered his anger now invite reflection. The people he once blamed now appear as teachers. And the woman he once feared losing, he begins to see her not as a threat, but as a mirror guiding him home. First, the shift is subtle. He feels emotions that used to scare him. Tears come unexpectedly, during a song, a memory, a sunrise. He doesn't fight them this time. He lets them fall, and for the first time in years he feels alive. He starts to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge between isolation and connection. He realizes that expressing himself doesn't make him less masculine. It makes him real. The armor begins to crack. Not because he's broken, but because light is finally finding its way through. The healed masculine doesn't abandon his strength. He simply redefines it. Strength, he learns, is not about control. It's about clarity. Not about dominance but direction. Not about being unshakable, but being present, even when he's trembling. He begins to trust his intuition again, that quiet inner voice he once ignored in favor of logic and pride. He listens to his body, to his emotions, to the silence between thoughts. He learns that peace isn't found by avoiding storms, but by becoming the calm within them. He becomes more intentional. Instead of reacting, he pauses. Instead of arguing, he listens. Instead of fleeing from discomfort, he stays. Because healing has taught him one of life's most profound truths. You cannot run from what is meant to teach you. Every trigger, every heartbreak, every confrontation with the feminine, they weren't punishments. They were invitations. Opportunities to rise above survival and embody consciousness. And as he begins to heal, something beautiful happens. He becomes safer. Not just for others but for himself. He no longer fears intimacy because he's no longer afraid of his own emotions. He no longer uses silence as a weapon because he's learned the power of communication. He no longer seeks validation because he's found his worth within. He begins to treat love as a sacred exchange, not a transaction. To him, love is no longer a game to win. It's a space to grow. In relationships, the healed masculine moves differently. He doesn't chase the feminine out of desperation. He meets her from devotion. He doesn't seek to possess her. He seeks to understand her. He doesn't hide his emotions. He expresses them with integrity. His love is no longer chaotic. It's conscious. No longer reactive. It's responsive. No longer rooted in fear. It's grounded in trust. He learns that presence is the most powerful form of protection. That listening is the highest form of respect. That consistency is the truest form of love. When the masculine begins to heal, he starts to repair his relationship with the feminine, not just externally but internally. He reconnects with the feminine energy within himself. His intuition, his empathy, his creativity, his capacity to feel. He no longer sees emotion as weakness but as wisdom. He no longer fears surrender, because he understands that surrender doesn't mean losing control. It means aligning with truth. And the more he integrates this inner balance, the more his outer world reflects it. He begins to notice synchronicities, moments of divine alignment that remind him he's on the right path. The universe starts to speak in whispers. A chance encounter. A recurring number. A song that says exactly what his heart feels. These are not coincidences. They're confirmations. Proof that his healing is not just emotional, it's spiritual. He's stepping into his divine purpose. Not as a ruler, not as a savior, but as a guardian of love and truth. But integration doesn't mean perfection. Even as he heals, there will be days he stumbles. Moments when old patterns resurface. Times when fear whispers again. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? And yet now he knows better. He no longer punishes himself for being human. He meets his own imperfection with compassion. He breathes. He reflects. He recalibrates. Because the healed masculine doesn't seek to erase his shadow. He learns to dance with it. There's a quiet confidence that emerges in this stage of awakening. He doesn't need to prove his worth through dominance or success. He doesn't measure love in ownership or control. He's no longer fueled by ego. He's guided by purpose. He becomes a man who can hold space for others without losing himself. Who can protect without oppressing. Who can lead without needing to be followed. He moves from reaction to creation. From control to surrender. From fear to faith. The feminine feels this shift. She senses his grounding energy returning. Steady, calm, trustworthy. For the first time, she can rest in his presence. Not because she needs him to complete her, but because she can finally feel his soul clear, conscious, awake. And when she feels that, she blossoms. Her heart opens again, not from naive hope, but from divine recognition. The masculine has remembered. When the masculine heals, his energy transforms the spaces around him. Children feel safe in his presence. Women feel seen, not judged. Other men feel inspired, not threatened, because he leads by example, not by force, but by embodiment. He becomes the mountain, steady and grounded, while also allowing rivers to flow freely around him. He becomes the sunlight, radiant but never burning. He becomes the protector not through control, but through awareness and love. Soft orchestral buildup, a sense of calm triumph. Healing the masculine is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who he always was. Before the pain, before the armor, before the fear. He was divine, steady, wise, radiant with love. He was the consciousness that gave structure to creation. He was the fire that warmed, not burned. He was the truth, silent, strong, unshakable. And now, as he rises again, he carries the lessons of his fall. He no longer seeks power over others. He embodies power through presence. To every man on this path, healing doesn't mean you'll never fall. It means you'll never fall unconsciously again. It means you'll rise with awareness, with humility, with grace. It means you'll know when to lead and when to listen, when to fight and when to forgive, when to speak and when to simply hold space. And to every woman walking beside him, trust the process. His awakening takes time, but when the masculine returns healed, he becomes the foundation on which love can finally stand. Music slows, a deep breath, the sound of wind settling into silence. Because when the masculine heals, the world heals with him. And for the first time in centuries, he doesn't just carry the light, he becomes it. Long pause. Then softly a closing whisper. The divine masculine is not becoming something new. He is coming home to himself. Part 6: The divine masculine in union. Leading with love, protecting with presence. Opening ambience, faint temple bells, soft heartbeat drums. The narrator's voice enters slow, steady with reverence. When the divine masculine has healed, when he has faced his shadows, released his armor, and learned to trust his heart again, something sacred awakens within him. He no longer sees himself as separate from love. He is love, anchored, embodied, steady. No longer the seeker of light, but the keeper of it. This is the moment when his energy begins to merge with the divine feminine, not in possession, but in union. A union built not from need, but from alignment, not from fear, but from faith, not from control, but from conscious leadership. Union is not about perfection. It's about polarity and harmony. Two souls remembering they were never halves of a broken whole, but two complete universes choosing to orbit in divine rhythm. When the masculine awakens fully, he understands his role is not to lead her, but to lead with her, not to control the direction, but to co-create the path. He becomes a protector of energy, not because she is fragile, but because her light deserves sacred space to flourish. He learns that leadership in love does not come from ego, comes from devotion, from the willingness to go first when storms arise, from the courage to be still when chaos tempts reaction, from the discipline to stay grounded when emotion surges. The divine masculine holds space, not as a cage, but as a sanctuary. He becomes the container through which love can express itself safely, wildly, freely. And in that sacred safety, the feminine expands. She blooms in ways she never could when she had to protect herself. She creates dreams, dances, and flows, because she feels the stability of his energy holding her in grace. This is the heart of true union, freedom and safety existing at once. The feminine brings intuition, compassion, and vision. The masculine brings clarity, action, and structure. Together, they become the balance that creation itself is built upon. When both energies are awakened within two people, love stops being chaotic. It becomes divine order. The relationship becomes a living temple, not a battlefield of wounds, but an altar of evolution. Every conversation becomes prayer. Every challenge becomes initiation. Every moment becomes sacred. But let's be honest, union doesn't mean it's always peaceful. True love tests consciousness. It will mirror every unhealed part, every lingering insecurity, every remnant of fear. The difference now is this: the healed masculine no longer runs. He doesn't fight to be right. He doesn't use silence as punishment or power as control. Instead, he listens. He breathes. He chooses presence over pride. Because he knows that in union, every conflict is not about who wins, but about what truth is asking to emerge. His protection takes on a new form. He no longer protects the relationship by avoiding truth. He protects it by honoring it. He no longer protects the feminine by silencing her pain. He protects her by standing beside her as she feels it. He no longer guards love by tightening his grip. He guards it by trusting its flow. Protection in its highest form is not control. It is awareness. It's being so present that nothing unconscious can take root. Saying without words, I am here. You are safe. We can face anything together. The divine masculine becomes the anchor of divine union. He brings stability without stagnation, direction without dominance, and strength without suppression. He is the lighthouse that guides the feminines waves back to shore. He is the mountain that allows her winds to dance freely around him. He is the silence that gives meaning to her song. And through her reflection, he continues to grow. Because even healed, he remains a student of love, ever deepening, ever expanding. When the masculine leads from love, the feminine responds with trust. And when trust replaces fear, connection becomes effortless. She doesn't have to shrink to feel safe. She doesn't have to harden to be respected. She doesn't have to chase to feel wanted. She simply is. And in her being, he finds purpose. Her intuition refines his direction. Her emotions sharpen his awareness. Her softness reawakens his strength. Together they create a symphony, masculine rhythm and feminine melody, weaving into a song the universe recognizes as harmony. In union, love becomes more than emotion, it becomes service. The healed masculine understands that his relationship is not his possession, but his mission, to protect the vibration of love itself, to anchor consciousness on earth through his actions, his words, his presence. He begins to live intentionally, making decisions, not just for himself, but for the collective energy he contributes to. Every act of integrity becomes sacred. Every word of truth becomes offering. Every boundary becomes prayer. He no longer loves just her. He loves through her. Through their union, he loves the world. And yet, even within this sacred merging, he never loses himself, nor does she. Because divine love doesn't consume, it complements. It doesn't demand fusion, it celebrates freedom. The healed masculine knows that to keep love alive, he must keep growing. Union isn't the end of his evolution, it's the beginning of conscious partnership. He learns that love isn't always about passion. Sometimes it's patience. It's not always excitement. Sometimes it's quiet trust. It's not about forever promises. It's about daily presence. He no longer fears impermanence, because he understands that every moment of true love is eternal in essence. Soft background tones, deep cello, subtle choral hum. The divine masculine in union becomes a pillar of peace in a restless world. He teaches others not through preaching but through presence. People feel his energy, grounded, sincere, unwavering. He doesn't impose, he inspires. His leadership is humble. His protection is gentle. His love is silent, yet undeniable. He doesn't seek attention. He simply radiates alignment. In the end, divine union is not about finding the perfect partner. It's about becoming the frequency that your soul already vibrates with. It's about remembering that the masculine and feminine have never been at war. They were only waiting for remembrance. When the masculine heals, he holds the space for the feminine to rise. When the feminine heals, she calls the masculine back to his truth. And when they finally meet, it's not two people falling in love. It's love recognizing itself in two forms. Music swells, golden light, soft drums, choral rise. To every man on this journey, your role in union is not to dominate, but to devote, not to control, but to contain with consciousness, not to impress, but to embody. Your love is not measured by how much you give, but by how deeply you can be present. Because the world doesn't need more men who chase love. It needs men who become love, anchored, aware, awake. And when you do, the divine feminine doesn't just meet you. She recognizes you, because she has been waiting, not for your perfection, but for your presence. Soft closing, deep breath, fading piano. When the masculine leads with love, the feminine follows with grace. And together they awaken heaven, not somewhere else, but here, on earth, within the heart. Part 7, The Signs of True Balance. When the masculine and feminine become one within, there is a moment, after all the storms have passed, after the running and returning, after the chasing, the mirroring, the surrendering, when the two energies finally meet, not as lovers across distance, but as forces within you. Because the highest form of divine union was never about two becoming one. It was always about one becoming whole. When the masculine and feminine energies within you begin to harmonize, life starts to flow differently. You no longer swing between extremes, doing too much or feeling too much, chasing or retreating, controlling or surrendering. Instead, you move through the world with grace, rooted yet fluid, steady yet soft, grounded yet infinite. It's not something you force. It happens quietly, like the ocean meeting the sky at the horizon, two vast elements merging seamlessly into light. For so long you may have lived divided, pulled between logic and intuition, giving and receiving, action and rest. Your mind told you to go faster. Your heart whispered to slow down. Your masculine wanted certainty. Your feminine wanted trust. But now they are learning to dance, not compete. The inner masculine begins to listen to the rhythm of the feminine. He learns that her intuition is not chaos, it's guidance. That her emotions are not distractions, they're information. That her softness does not weaken him, it refines him. And the feminine within learns that his structure doesn't limit her. It supports her. That his direction doesn't suppress her. It grounds her. That his strength doesn't overshadow her, it amplifies her. They stop fighting. They start listening. And in that sacred listening, balance is born. You feel it first as peace. Not the kind that depends on everything going right, but the kind that stays even when everything falls apart. It's the peace of knowing you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone, not even yourself. The peace of knowing that love no longer has to come from outside. It already lives here, in your breath, in your body, in your being. You start to move differently. Your choices are no longer driven by fear, but by alignment. You no longer chase what isn't meant for you. You attract what vibrates with your truth. That's balance. Not silence, not stillness, but harmony in motion. In this state, your inner masculine becomes your anchor. He gives your dreams structure, your visions direction, your emotions safety. He acts with integrity, protects your peace, and stands for your truth. He no longer needs validation. His confidence is quiet but unshakable. And your inner feminine becomes your compass. She reminds you to rest, to feel, to trust. She softens your edges, breathes creativity into your logic, and brings compassion into your strength. She moves like water, not resisting but shaping everything she touches. Together they create a symphony, not of perfection, but of presence. When these two forces merge within, you begin to see life as energy, not battle. You stop labeling parts of yourself as good or bad. You stop chasing love as a destination and start realizing it's a frequency you emit. You understand that your purpose isn't something you have to find. It's something you remember once you stop running from yourself. Every action becomes infused with clarity and compassion. Every rest becomes filled with trust and renewal. You no longer burn out because your masculine knows when to stop and your feminine knows when to rise. There are clear signs that you are entering this sacred balance. You start responding instead of reacting. You listen to understand, not to defend. You can feel pain without becoming it. You can hold love without needing to possess it. You can take responsibility without carrying guilt. You can let go without feeling abandoned. You stop asking, "What if I lose them?" and start asking, "How can I love better?" Even if they go. You stop needing the world to validate you, because you finally validate yourself. And strangely, as you stop needing, everything you once chased begins to flow effortlessly into your life. You begin to magnetize instead of chase, because now you are both the magnet and the field. Your energy feels coherent, aligned, authentic, whole. People feel it when you walk into a room. They can't explain it. They just sense peace. The kind of peace that comes from someone who no longer hides from their truth. This is what divine balance looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, but quietly transformative. It doesn't scream, it glows. And the most profound sign of this inner union is how you relate to others. You no longer see your relationships as a source of completion, but as mirrors of expansion. You no longer blame others for your wounds. You thank them for revealing what's ready to be healed. You no longer fear solitude. You savor it because your own company finally feels like home. When you meet love again, it's different. It's not an escape, it's an elevation. It's not about losing yourself. It's about being seen as you are. Two whole beings meeting in reverence, not need. Soft ambient layers rise like breath meeting heartbeat. The truth is, balance was never about dividing the masculine and feminine perfectly. It was about merging them consciously, understanding that the masculine is the consciousness, and the feminine is the creation. He is the sky. She is the wind. He is awareness. She is expression. And both live inside you. When they align, you move through life as a bridge between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, being and becoming. Your masculine keeps you rooted. Your feminine keeps you alive. You begin to see the divine in everything. In your failures, your victories, your waiting, your movement. Nothing feels wasted anymore. Every experience becomes sacred data, guiding, teaching, evolving you. Even your old wounds don't sting the same way. They've turned into wisdom. You can look back with gratitude instead of shame, because you see now everything that broke you was actually breaking you open. And so the twin flames within, your inner masculine and feminine, finally stop fighting for dominance. They join hands. They walk together. And life, once chaotic, begins to hum in divine rhythm. You start to wake up each morning with purpose but without pressure. You move with intention but without force. You love deeply but without fear. Your energy becomes a sanctuary, for yourself and for others. Soft choral voices swell, light and ethereal. This is the state of divine balance. It's not something you chase, something you remember. Because the truth is, you were never divided. You only believed you were. The sun and the moon have always shared the same sky. The light and the dark have always belonged to the same whole. The masculine and the feminine have always been two languages, telling one story, the story of you. Final rise of music, serene, radiant. So when you reach this harmony, you don't become perfect, you become real. You walk through the world with quiet confidence, with open heart and steady hands. You give without losing. You receive without fear. You love without boundaries, because your very being has become love itself. And in that moment, you realize, union was never out there. It was always within. Soft exhale. Music fades into stillness. Part 8. The New Masculine. How he serves, creates, and leads in the age of consciousness. There is a new kind of man emerging on this planet. Not the one the world told him to be, but the one his soul always was. He is not here to dominate, to compete, or to conquer. He is here to serve, to create, to lead, not through control but through consciousness. This is the rise of the new masculine. For centuries, the masculine has been taught to measure his worth through what he achieves, through wealth, titles, dominance, or the number of people who obey him. He was told that to lead meant to have power over others. But true leadership, as he now remembers, is not about hierarchy, it's about harmony. The new masculine doesn't lead from his mind alone. He leads from his integrated being, from heart, from awareness, from presence. He understands that power without compassion is corruption, and compassion without boundaries is collapse. So he becomes both the sword and the open palm, sharp when truth is required, gentle when love is needed. He no longer defines masculinity through resistance, but through responsibility. Not the kind that weighs him down, but the kind that awakens him to purpose. He knows his energy influences the world around him. Every word he speaks, every thought he holds, every action he takes, ripples through the collective field. So he becomes intentional. He moves slowly, consciously, deliberately, aware that presence is the most powerful form of creation. The new masculine has learned that leadership begins with self. Before he can guide others, he must first master the kingdom within. He confronts his ego daily, not to destroy it, but to teach it devotion. He faces his emotions not as enemies, but as messengers. He honors his inner child, the boy who once longed to be seen and safe. And through that compassion, he becomes the father energy the world has forgotten. The old masculine built empires. The new masculine builds ecosystems, where everyone can grow. He no longer seeks to be the strongest in the room. He seeks to empower the room itself. He knows that true strength is the ability to raise others up, not keep them below. He is not threatened by the feminine's rise. He celebrates it, because he understands her freedom is not his loss, is his liberation. When she is free to express, he is free to rest. When she is safe to feel, he is safe to act. When she thrives, he thrives. This new archetype of man doesn't run from emotion anymore. He feels deeply without shame. He cries, he laughs, he admits when he doesn't know. He asks questions instead of pretending to have all the answers. He apologizes when he's wrong. He listens not to respond, but to receive. He understands that vulnerability is not weakness. It's his bridge to intimacy, because the deepest strength is not in how much he can endure, but in how openly he can love. He creates not from competition but from collaboration. He doesn't need to outshine others. He knows the sun never apologizes for shining, and neither does it fear other stars. When he works, he channels intention, not just effort. He builds businesses, art, and communities infused with meaning, because he no longer separates success from service. To him, creation is sacred, a dialogue between his divine masculine action and the divine feminine inspiration that flows through him. He becomes a living expression of divine balance, a man who can hold a vision and still listen to grace. And because he has learned to listen, the new masculine begins to see, really see. He sees the pain of others without judgment. He sees the strength in gentleness. He sees the beauty in simplicity. He sees the soul beneath the surface. He recognizes that every being, man, woman, child, carries a spark of the same divine consciousness he does. So he lives with reverence. He doesn't need religion to tell him what's sacred. He experiences the sacred everywhere. In a glance, a breath, a sunrise, a truth spoken in love. When the new masculine loves, he doesn't possess. He doesn't project. He doesn't promise perfection. He simply shows up, again and again, with consistency and truth. His love doesn't burn to consume. It burns to illuminate. He doesn't save the feminine. He supports her in saving herself. And together they walk not in fantasy, but in frequency. A union grounded in consciousness, not dependency. Soft music shift. A slow rise of cello and flute. The healed masculine becomes a living example of balance for the collective. He demonstrates that action and stillness can coexist. That logic and intuition can collaborate. That power and peace are not opposites, they are reflections. When he speaks, people feel his words because they come from integrity. When he moves, others follow not because they must, but because they trust. His energy anchors spaces, communities, families, nations. Not through dominance but through devotion. He doesn't try to be light. He is light, grounded in the body, unapologetically human, divinely aware. He has reclaimed sacred sexuality too. No longer does he see intimacy as conquest or validation. He understands it as communion, a sacred exchange of energy, a prayer between two souls remembering God through touch. He knows that masculine energy gives through presence, not performance. That pleasure deepens through safety. That the greatest power lies not in taking, but in witnessing. To hold a woman in awareness, that is his art. To protect her vulnerability without controlling it, that is his mastery. To make her feel seen without needing to own her, that is his devotion. The new masculine is not afraid of silence anymore. He no longer fills space with noise to prove he exists. He sits in stillness and feels his own pulse, his own breath, his own soul. He learns that the world doesn't need him to fix everything. It needs him to be present with everything. Because true leadership doesn't come from fixing, comes from understanding. And perhaps the most beautiful quality of this new man is his humility. He knows he is still learning, still unlearning, still awakening layer by layer. He doesn't claim to have arrived. He simply commits to staying aware. He no longer seeks perfection. He seeks alignment. And through that alignment, he becomes unstoppable. Not in force but in flow. Soft background choral tone rises, warm and radiant. The new masculine is here. In fathers who choose patience over pride. In sons who dare to express emotion. In leaders who listen before they speak. In lovers who protect through gentleness. In friends who uplift without envy. He is the man who chooses truth over convenience, presence over performance, and love over fear. He is the bridge between the old world and the new. He doesn't destroy the systems. He transforms them from within, with consciousness as his compass, and compassion as his guide. Final crescendo, slow orchestral glow, fading into silence. This is the dawn of a new era, where men lead with awareness, serve with humility, create with purpose, and love with devotion. They no longer walk above the feminine. They walk beside her. They no longer lead with fear. They lead with heart. And as the new masculine rises, so too does the world. Long pause. The final line delivered as a whisper. Because when the masculine remembers love, humanity remembers God. Part 9: The Collective Awakening. When healed masculine energy transforms the world. When one man heals, it changes his life. But when many men heal, it changes the world. The ripple of awakening that begins in the heart of a single soul can move through generations, shifting the vibration of an entire planet. Because healed masculine energy is not personal, it is planetary. For centuries, humanity has lived under the shadow of distorted masculinity. An imbalance born from fear, control, and separation. Built civilizations, yes, but it also built prisons. It achieved greatness in technology, but lost tenderness in humanity. It conquered lands, but forgot how to cultivate hearts. We created systems of power without presence, structures without soul, and progress without peace. But now something ancient is stirring. Collective remembering. A sacred shift. The rise of the conscious masculine. Across the world, men are beginning to feel what they once denied. The weight of silence, the ache of isolation, the longing to connect. They are beginning to question what it means to be a man. They are beginning to listen, not to compete but to understand. And as they do, the energy of the world begins to rebalance. For every man who chooses awareness over aggression, a piece of the collective shadow dissolves. For every father who learns to love without control, a new generation is freed. For every leader who replaces domination with integrity, a new paradigm is born. This is how global healing begins. Not with revolution but with revelation. The healed masculine is not against the old. He transforms. He brings consciousness into the structures that once oppressed him. He infuses the systems with soul. He steps into workplaces, governments, schools, and communities, not to overthrow but to awaken. He becomes the presence that asks, what if leadership could be love in action? What if power could mean protection instead of possession? What if success could mean service, not superiority? And slowly, silently, the world begins to shift. In families, the new masculine creates safety, not through authority but through awareness. He learns that his strength lies not in control, but in consistency. He listens to his children, truly listens, not to shape them into reflections of himself, but to help them find their own truth. He teaches by example, by showing that vulnerability and wisdom can exist in the same breath. He no longer needs to be the father who knows everything. He becomes the father who feels everything. And in doing so, he raises a generation of sons who are free to cry, and daughters who are free to speak. In relationships, the collective masculine begins to heal the collective feminine. No longer does love mean domination or dependence. It becomes partnership, balance, equality. Men begin to honor women as mirrors of divine intelligence, not objects of desire or conquest. They learn to hold space for emotion without fear, to listen without defending, to lead without suppressing. And women, feeling this shift, begin to soften again, not into submission, but into trust. Because when the masculine, say, the feminine can finally rest. And when she rests, she rises. Together, they restore balance to creation itself. In the workplace, healed masculine energy changes the entire definition of success. It brings back compassion into competition. It values purpose as much as profit, and people as much as performance. Bosses become mentors. Colleagues become collaborators. The culture shifts from who's the best to how can we build something better. Decisions are made not only from logic, but from consciousness, not only from numbers, but from intuition. This is how the masculine, once driven by ambition, evolves into the masculine guided by awareness. On the global scale, the new masculine energy redefines power itself. It no longer seeks to dominate nations, but to unite them. It no longer builds weapons to destroy, but systems to heal. Imagine a world where leaders speak with empathy, where negotiation replaces intimidation, where nations compete not in who can control the most, but who can contribute the most to collective well-being. This is not fantasy, it's evolution, and it begins within the human heart. Soft rise in ambient music, hopeful, cinematic, spacious. When the masculine awakens, he becomes a steward of the earth itself. He no longer exploits nature for gain. He collaborates with her as the divine feminine in form. He plants, builds, and creates, not to take, but to give back. He recognizes that Mother Earth has always been the ultimate feminine, nurturing, abundant, endlessly forgiving, and he chooses to protect her not out of guilt, but out of reverence, because when a man is connected to his soul, he cannot harm what he recognizes as sacred. In communities, healed men create bridges instead of barriers. They form brotherhoods rooted not in dominance, but in devotion. They gather not to boast, but to heal. Men begin to hold circles instead of competitions. They speak about emotion, fatherhood, purpose, and peace. They remind each other that masculinity was never meant to be a lonely journey. And in that shared vulnerability, they rediscover something ancient, the power of presence, the medicine of honesty, the strength of unity. This is the collective awakening, not a rebellion but a remembrance, the return of sacred balance, the reunion of heaven and earth through human consciousness. Because as the masculine heals, so does everything he touches. When he becomes conscious, families flourish. When he becomes kind, women feel safe. When he becomes accountable, children learn trust. When he becomes grounded, society becomes stable. And when he becomes present, the planet itself breathes easier. Soft piano enters, warm, reflective. It doesn't happen all at once. The transformation is slow, subtle, quiet, like dawn creeping over the horizon. But make no mistake, it is happening right now, in conversations between fathers and sons, in apologies whispered between lovers, in silent prayers of men who finally say, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to love. That is the sound of the collective masculine awakening. This is not about gender. It's about energy, about the divine blueprint of balance returning to humanity. Because the world doesn't need more powerful men. It needs present ones. Men who can feel deeply and act wisely. Men who can lead without ego and follow without shame. Men who are not afraid to say, I love you, and mean it not as weakness, but as truth. When that energy reaches critical mass, the world itself begins to change frequency. War loses meaning. Greed feels foreign. And love becomes the new logic. Music swells, slow, orchestral. Rise, golden in tone. The collective awakening of the masculine is not a distant dream. It's a movement of souls remembering their origin. It's men returning to the heart, and through that, returning humanity to harmony. Because the divine masculine was never meant to rule. He was meant to protect life, to anchor truth, to hold the light steady, so that creation, the divine feminine, can continue to unfold in beauty. This is the age of balance, the age of remembrance, the age where power and peace finally shake hands. The music softens, fades into silence. The voice lowers, intimate. So when one man chooses to heal, know that the universe expands with him. When one heart awakens, the entire world breathes a little easier. Because the divine masculine does not rise alone. He rises for all. Long pause, one heartbeat, then the final whisper. And when he does, the world remembers love again. Part 10: The Return to Wholeness, the future of love, leadership, and collective harmony. There comes a time in every soul's journey when separation no longer makes sense. When we finally understand, there was never him and her, never us and them, never light against dark. There was only one consciousness, expressed through billions of forms, all learning to remember itself through love. And this is the moment of return. The divine masculine and feminine, after lifetimes of misunderstanding, after cycles of war, pride, silence, and longing, are finally finding their way home, not as enemies seeking victory, but as mirrors seeking wholeness. This return to balance is not just spiritual, it is evolutionary. It is the next chapter of human consciousness, a shift from domination to devotion, from fear to faith, from separation to sacred unity. The new earth is not a place we go to, it is a frequency we become, and that frequency is wholeness. Wholeness means the end of the old wars, the inner ones and the outer ones. It means we stop defining ourselves through what we reject and start expanding through what we accept. It means that love stops being something we fall into and becomes something we rise within. When humanity begins to embody this wholeness, everything transforms. Politics becomes service. Leadership becomes stewardship. Business becomes benevolence. Technology becomes consciousness in motion. And love becomes the foundation of every system we create. Because when both the masculine and feminine are healed, we finally remember what creation was meant to be: a partnership with the divine. The healed masculine leads with awareness. He listens, protects, and builds from integrity. He no longer competes with others. He collaborates with consciousness. His leadership becomes prayer in action, a sacred vow to use his strength to serve the collective. And the healed feminine flows with wisdom. She births visions, nurtures ideas, heals through intuition. She no longer hides her softness, because she knows softness is power. Together, these energies weave a new paradigm, one where the head and the heart no longer pull apart, but walk hand in hand toward a shared destiny. This is what true leadership looks like in the age of consciousness. It's not the loudest voice in the room. It's the quietest presence, the one that calms storms simply by being there. True leaders of the new earth won't command obedience. They will embody coherence. Their vibration will do what their words never could: restore balance, awaken truth, inspire evolution. They will be men and women who have walked through fire, who have met their shadows and returned with light, who have turned pain into wisdom and love into action. Soft instrumental shift, slow strings swelling under warm choral voices. This new world will not be built overnight. It will rise slowly, through the quiet revolutions of everyday hearts. A father who learns to say, "I'm sorry." A mother who teaches her son to cry. A teacher who sees potential instead of performance. A company that values consciousness over profit. A community that celebrates connection over competition. Every act of integrity, every choice made from love, every moment of awareness, is a brick in the foundation of this new earth. This is how heaven arrives. Not from the sky, but from within us. The return to wholeness is also the return to presence. We begin to slow down, to listen again, to touch life instead of rushing through it. We start to eat with gratitude, speak with intention, breathe with awareness. We rediscover what it means to live as sacred beings in a sacred world. And as more of us awaken, a quiet network of light forms, souls remembering each other, hearts recognizing home in one another's eyes. This is the union grid, the unseen architecture of divine love spreading across humanity. But the journey of wholeness isn't about escaping pain. It's about transforming it. Even in the new earth, there will be challenges, but we will meet them differently. Not as victims, but as creators. We will understand that darkness isn't evil. It's simply unintegrated light. That anger isn't hatred. It's a cry for alignment. That loss isn't punishment. It's evolution in disguise. This is maturity. This is mastery. This is the consciousness of the healed divine masculine and feminine, seeing through illusion and responding with love. When wholeness becomes our way of being, we stop needing to seek union outside ourselves. We carry it everywhere. We are the lovers and the beloved, the teacher and the student, the protector and the nurturer, the creator and the creation. We become living embodiments of the divine, sacred instruments through which God experiences its own reflection. And in that realization, we find peace, not because everything is perfect, but because we finally understand that everything is purposeful. The music shifts again, soft piano, echoing like light over water. The healed masculine will rebuild the world with wisdom. The healed feminine will breathe life into it. Together, they will create civilizations that honor the soul. Education will nurture creativity instead of conformity. Medicine will serve healing instead of profit. Governments will evolve into guardians of truth and compassion. Technology will amplify consciousness, not distract from it. And at the center of it all, there will be love. Not romantic but radiant. Not personal but planetary. A love that doesn't belong to anyone, because it belongs to everyone. When the world reaches that vibration, there will be no more need for saviors, because everyone will remember they are one. There will be no more wars, because peace will not be an agreement, it will be a frequency. There will be no more hunger, because abundance will no longer be hoarded, it will be shared. There will be no more loneliness, because every being will finally know they have never been separate from Source. This is not a dream. This is destiny. Music swells, angelic choir, light percussion rising like breath. The return to wholeness begins and ends within you. Every time you choose love over fear, you move the entire planet closer to its awakening. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be present. Every time you speak truth with compassion, you balance the world. Every time you forgive, you rewrite the collective story. Every time you look into another's eyes and say, I see you, the universe expands in recognition, because every healed heart becomes a portal, a doorway through which heaven touches earth. And so, as we come to the end of this journey, remember this truth. The divine masculine is not separate from the divine feminine. They are not energies you chase, but aspects you embody. Together, they make you whole. Together they make the world whole. And that wholeness, that sacred balance, is the birthright of every soul on this earth. Music slows, gentle piano returns, soft and golden. So take a breath. Place your hand over your heart. Feel the rhythm of life pulsing within you. The union of stillness and motion, logic and intuition, heaven and humanity. This is the divine within you, the light you came here to remember, the love you came here to restore. You don't have to wait for a new world to arrive. You are building it, with every thought, every word, every act of awareness. Final pause. The music fades to near silence. The voice softens to a whisper. This is the return to wholeness, the end of separation, the dawn of divine harmony, the homecoming of the soul. And the truth is simple. The new world is not coming. It's already here, because you are. Long pause, single heartbeat sound. Then silence.